Ever get that feeling that, I don't know, some people seem to be playing a totally different game, like they're judged by completely different rules you don't quite get?
Yeah, like their wins and losses aren't really counted the same way as, well, for most people.
Exactly. And that observation kind of led us down this fascinating rabbit hole, really exploring a core societal dynamic,
Yeah.
the very distinct ways we evaluate experts and elites.
Right. And we think understanding this difference can be a real eye-opener. It might actually change how you interpret what institutions are doing or, the people leading them.
So this whole idea, the one we're digging into today, it comes from Rob Henderson, right? He built on a concept from Robin Hanson's Substack, and it was published in the Free Press.
That's the one. So our goal here in this deep dive is to really unpack this difference. What makes someone an expert versus an elite? How are they judged differently? And crucially, what does this split mean for you trying to navigate the world and all the information flying around?
Okay, so let's start with experts. Who are they, according to this framework? Henderson basically says they're the people who know things. Simple enough, maybe.
Well, yeah, but the real kicker is who decides if they actually know their stuff. And that's their peers, right?
Yeah.
Other experts in that same specific field.
So the judgment is all about, like, technical knowledge, how precise their work is, can it be tested, replicated?
And can they defend it? Under tough questioning from people who really speak their language, the technical language.
Right. So their main goal is just getting it right. The details matter a lot. Their arguments kind of live or die on those granular details.
Exactly. So when you hear someone presented as an expert, you should probably ask, okay, are their claims being checked out by people who really understand this specific area?
You can often spot them, maybe. Credentials, precise language, sometimes very technical, that real focus on specifics.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's shift gears then. What about elites?
Elites. Well, they're evaluated using a much, much broader yardstick. It's not just about knowing things.
Right. It's also wealth, looks, taste, social skills.
Who they know, charisma, that sort of overall cultural vibe or cachet.
Henderson points to hiring practices at, top firms. They often grab graduates from elite universities, even if their degree seems totally unrelated to the job.
Yeah, like that English or poli-sci grad from a top school landing a consulting gig. Their specific subject knowledge isn't really the point.
Precisely. Their expertise isn't the main currency there. So when you see someone influential, you got to consider the whole range of factors that probably got them there.
And the way they communicate is fundamentally different too, isn't it?
Totally. Less about the deep dive into data, more about setting a tone, projecting values. Even nonverbal stuff matters.
It feels more about, like, building alliances, getting consensus through shared identity, maybe. Not always a step-by-step proof.
Exactly. It's about allegiance sometimes, not just evidence. So when you feel like you're being persuaded, it's worth asking. Is this hitting my understanding with facts, or is it appealing more to my sense of belonging, shared values?
That contrast in communication is really key. Experts are all about accuracy, breaking things down, letting the evidence lead.
Whereas elite communication is often more about the social dynamics, right? Building rapport, finding common ground. Henderson uses that great example from Mad Men.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Rosen and Don Draper.
Right. Rosen, the more science-minded guy, he sees Don's influence and just gets it that it comes from Don's persona, his charisma, not necessarily deep knowledge of, well, anything specific.
It really shows there are different ways to gain influence, each with its own kind of logic.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've got these two categories, expert and elite, but it's not totally black and white, is it? Henderson talks about a spectrum.
Yeah, that spectrum idea is super useful.
Yeah.
At one end, you've got maybe the pure expert. Think of like a mathematician lost in abstract proofs. Their world is theorems, not necessarily schmoozing at parties.
Right. And on the other end, the pure elite, maybe a top politician, a CEO, someone who might not have deep technical knowledge in every area, but is brilliant at navigating those complex social waters, bringing people together.
And that spectrum helps us see how people can blend both, or how their roles change over a career.
Like how elites often say they're just following the science.
Exactly. We believe the experts. But, and this is crucial, elites can, and often do, overrule expert advice, especially if an issue gets emotionally loaded or politically tricky.
And they'll still frame their decision as if it's purely expert-driven.
Right, which really highlights that potential clash between expert knowledge and, well, elite priorities.
It's also interesting how many elites start out as experts, you know?
Yeah, that's a really common path. Think
Hmm.
about managers who started in engineering or research, or thought leaders who began as academics or journalists.
They had that initial deep knowledge, that focus on getting it right, but then their focus shifts. It becomes more about broader influence, persuasion.
They might keep the expert label, but what they do day to day looks a lot more like navigating the elite world. That move from depth to breadth.
Yeah, to the well-trodden path.
You can see a similar contrast between, say, academics and public intellectuals. Well, academics usually stick to a narrow field, communicate very cautiously, mostly to other experts. They're often hesitant to make big, sweeping claims.
Whereas public intellectuals engage way more broadly. They're freer with their opinions, offer recommendations, try to shape public debate, build coalitions.
And they get judged not just on accuracy, but on those broader elite things too. Their public persona, eloquence, perceived wisdom, taste, poise.
Okay, let's dig into those communication styles a bit more.
Hmm.
Expert talk. Precise, analytical, skeptical, comfortable with public disagreement, right? It's part of the process.
Absolutely. Disagreement helps refine ideas. But elite talk, it tends to be smoother, maybe more flattery, sometimes a bit vague, even intentionally so. Big emphasis on shared values, common goals.
That vagueness thing, Thomas Sowell had that great quote about university presidents and politicians mastering the art of, what was it?
Saying things that make no sense with a straight face and a lofty tone. Something like that.
Huh. Yeah, because the goal isn't always pure granular truth. It's often about keeping things moving, maintaining cohesion in institutions, in the media, politics.
Right. Expert talk aims for truth. Elite talk often aims to, well, move things forward, build that consensus.
It's like comparing, I don't know, a super detailed technical talk at a conference
Yeah, where they dive into methods and data.
versus a high-level panel discussion where people give broader takes, maybe outside their core expertise.
Or the frontline worker who knows the system inside out versus their manager who can talk about it in a meeting but couldn't actually do the task. As you move up, the emphasis shifts from being the expert to performing as an elite.
We see this everywhere, don't we? Journalism.
Definitely. The beat reporter digging for facts, verifying details, that's closer to the expert model. The opinion columnist shaping narratives, signaling values, that's more of an elite role.
Or on boards, you have advisors, the specific knowledge experts.
Versus the directors themselves, who are often there for judgment, influence, connections, status.
Even Nobel Prize winners. They're at the absolute peak of expert success.
Yet so many try to pivot, right? Writing op-eds on everything under the sun, trying to enter that broader elite sphere.
But Robin Hanson points out it's often really hard after a lifetime of deep specialization. Being a top expert in one thing doesn't just automatically make you an elite influencer elsewhere.
No, it really shows how separate those realms can be. And there's this mutual envy sometimes, maybe. Experts want the reach elites have.
And elites might want the credibility that real expertise brings.
But as Henderson notes, the usual flow is experts trying to become elites, not really the other way around.
And financially.
Elites are generally better placed to turn status into money. Plus, you see people in public roles constantly switching hats, right? Acting as an expert here, an elite there, depending on the situation.
Okay, so we have this divide. What happens when they really clash? When elites decide to, step in or override the experts?
Well, Anderson's take is that if elites aren't that interested in the topic, the experts mostly run the show in their domain.
But the second elites form a consensus and start paying attention.
They tend to take over. Their view often becomes the dominant one, the official line.
The COVID-19 pandemic seems like a huge example of this.
A really striking one, yeah. Initially, you had quite a bit of debate and uncertainty among health experts about, say, widespread lockdowns or universal masks.
But then once the global elites, political leaders, big media, institutional heads, kind of aligned on a specific approach.
Oof. The official expert consensus seemed to shift incredibly fast to match that elite view. It felt like decades of established pandemic protocols were just overturned almost overnight.
That rapid shift really shows the power of elite agreement in shaping narratives, even ones that seem purely scientific or expert-driven.
It was dramatic, yeah. And Henderson highlights how different it was from historical pandemic plans. You had experts who knew the history, the evolving science. But once that elite consensus formed, institutions and many experts just seemed to fall in line.
It makes you wonder how independent expert opinion can really stay when powerful elite interests align.
Mm-hmm. Henderson gives another example, too, in criminology.
Oh, yeah.
Research using victimization surveys
Yeah.
and data-driven policing often suggests that focused policing can deter violent crime.
Okay.
But then you had elite commentators pushing hard for things like defund the police, based more on social resonance, political goals, sometimes directly contradicting that expert consensus based on crime data.
So again, the elite narrative, driven by different priorities values, politics can steer things away from what the expert analysis suggests.
Exactly. It really underlines that for any big idea or policy to get real traction, it usually needs that elite stamp of approval. And it often needs to be presented in a way that fits the elite style.
Even if it's solid expert work, if it doesn't get validated in those elite circles, it might just stay academic, niche.
Pretty much. Henderson talks about how the status of who comes up with an idea massively influences how it's received. An idea from Harvard just carries more weight, right?
Right, which is where things like management consulting firms come in.
Yes. They essentially do status transfer. They can take an idea, maybe even one that came from inside a company, repackage it with their elite brand credibility.
And suddenly it's taken much more seriously.
Exactly. So expert knowledge is crucial, but it often needs that elite validation to really make waves or change policy.
This brings us to what makes someone elite in the first place. It's clearly not just brains or specific knowledge.
No, Henderson talks about accumulating other traits, things like charisma, charm, social skills, connections. Even physical attractiveness seems to play a role.
Really? Attractiveness?
Yeah, there's some interesting research. One study looked at scientists' speaking fees for social scientists being seen as more attractive, correlated with higher fees, maybe fitting that more public elite image.
Okay. And for natural scientists?
Higher fees were sometimes linked to being seen as less attractive, maybe playing into that classic expert stereotype focused on the work, not the image.
Wow, that's kind of counterintuitive.
And get this. Other research Henderson mentions suggests that for top-tier scientists, being too attractive might slightly decrease their chances of winning a Nobel Prize.
Why? Why?
The theory is that more attractive scientists might get more opportunities for those elite career tracks, leadership roles, admin positions.
Which are prestigious, but maybe pull them away from the deep, focused research needed for those huge breakthroughs.
That seems to be the suggestion. It really highlights that tension between reaching the peak of expertise and moving into broader elite influence.
And even within academia, you have your own kind of elites, right? Department chairs, deans.
Absolutely. People positioned to bridge that gap between specialized research and the wider elite networks outside the university.
Okay, so different paths, different traits.
Yeah.
What about ambition? Is that viewed differently?
Henderson suggests it is. He thinks the drive for elite status might be a more ancient, instinctive thing for humans, whereas pursuing deep expertise in one narrow area, that might be newer, maybe even a bit counterinstinctive.
Interesting. So eliteness is about general prestige, making others feel like deferring to you is legitimate.
Yeah, and elites often need to project this whole package: competence, grace, attractiveness, articulateness, generosity, being public-spirited, even if it's just feigned concern for the greater good.
While experts, they can be more openly ambitious about their specific field.
Generally, yes. They have more leeway to be focused, even openly driven towards a specific expert goal without needing that whole polished elite persona.
That double standard is fascinating. Like the physics student saying, I want to win a Nobel, is admired.
But the political science student saying, I want to be president, might get side-eye, seem overly ambitious or calculating.
Right. And even celebrities, like athletes. Amazing talent isn't always enough for that broader elite status, is it?
No, they often need those extra elite qualities: charisma, a good story, eloquence to cross over. I think Michael Jordan, his influence went way beyond basketball because he had both the talent and that elite charisma.
So, bottom line, being an expert doesn't automatically make you an elite. Elites are defined by that wider social impressiveness, that presence.
Exactly. It's about who they are, how they carry themselves. And experts trying to break into elite circles often face hurdles because pedigree, polish, those social signals matter so much there.
And even when elites do engage with experts, Henderson suggests they might sort of filter it, reinterpret it to fit their own narrative.
Yeah, they might slum by talking to experts, but twist the info to fit their own agendas or values.
That's a critical point, which leads to his final, maybe slightly unsettling idea about populist movements.
Right, that many aren't really revolts from the bottom up. They're often more like power struggles between different elite factions.
Each trying to claim legitimacy and control the main story.
Precisely. Often a battle at the top, not purely a revolution from below.
Okay, so let's crystallize this. The big discussion. Experts focus on knowledge, validated by peers. Elites focus on broader social influence, consensus building, judged on a wider set of traits.
And getting your head around that divide, like we said at the start, is a really valuable tool. It's a new lens for looking at information, institutions, public figures, figuring out motivations.
It helps you be more critical, more nuanced about who you trust and why.
Absolutely.
So here's something to chew on. Think about the people, the institutions you trust. Are they operating mostly as experts, focused on rigorous knowledge?
Or are they acting more like elites, focused on shaping narratives and building influence?
How does thinking about this expert-elite difference change how you see their motivations, their statements?
Yeah, maybe take a closer look at those dynamics in your own world, your own spheres of influence. See what you notice.